From the moment I gained consciousness, I have lived in the palace of Alexander White, the god of war, never once leaving its confines. Everything I know about the outside world, I either heard from Alexander White or read in books. Having accompanied Alexander White for hundreds of years, I thought I was somewhat different from others.
Alexander, who's that woman you brought back?
That was until Alexander White returned from a trial with a woman who had a face identical to mine. For the next few days after his return, Alexander White spent most of his time in that woman's room. Curious about what they were doing, I transformed into my rabbit form and pressed my ear against the door, but I still couldn't hear anything.
Lily, what are you doing here?
The next moment, Alexander White opened the door, and I fell in front of them. I glanced at the woman, but Alexander White blocked my view. Such favoritism.
What are you doing?
Lily, Emily's body is in trouble. I need your heart's blood as a remedy.
Will I cease to exist?
Do not say such things. You cannot refuse.
The heart's blood was extracted by his own hand, using a slender, sharp knife that he conjured, piercing my chest. There was already a long scar there, a large raised mark that Alexander White never told me how it came to be. Now, he had added to it.
Alexander, when that girl recovers, let me leave.
The frequency of Alexander White extracting my heart's blood gradually increased, from once every 10 days to once every 7 days, and now every 2 days. I even suspected he was practicing some dark art involving rabbits, becoming more irritable by the day and sleeping poorly at night.
Alexander, what's troubling you?
He was often plagued by nightmares, but it had been a long time since he had been this troubled. Before his trial in the mortal world, he had been in a good mood, the perpetual gloom in his eyes dissipating somewhat. One day, Alexander White seemed to have business outside the palace. Before leaving, he reinforced the palace's barrier. I went to the library to read.
You look so cute. Your ears are so soft.
You are the one Alexander White brought back from the mortal world.
My name is Emily Green. What's yours, little rabbit?
My name is Lily Moore, not Little Rabbit.
Snow falls on the time of lily, leaving no moss where it lands. Your name is beautiful.
When will your illness be cured?
Once she recovered, Alexander White wouldn't need my heart's blood anymore. If Alexander White wanted to keep her in the palace and be with her, perhaps he would let me go, and I could visit the mortal world.
I won't get better.
Emily Green's coughing grew worse, and she eventually coughed up blood. Seeing the dark blood on the handkerchief made me uncomfortable.
Will you cease to exist?
As soon as I said that, Alexander White pushed the door open. His face was pale, and there seemed to be blood on his collar, his lips also pale.
Lily, go back to your room. I brought you candied hawthorn on the table and a new storybook. I need to talk to her.
He still wanted me to eat candied hawthorn. Perhaps it was Emily Green who liked candied hawthorn. I didn't go back to my room. I transformed into my original form and eavesdropped at the door.
Did they trouble you again?
If you don't want people to know, don't do it. The old matter from thousands of years ago has been brought up again. Finding you was only a matter of time.
You've raised her to be very different from before.
Things are different now. If it were like before, I would be afraid.
Alexander, you can't hide it from her forever.
I just want her to live without worries. My time is limited. I just want to find a way for her to survive.
I couldn't hear the rest of their conversation clearly, but that one sentence was enough to make a rabbit think for a long time. Could Alexander White die too? Why would he die? How could he die? He was the revered god of war in the heavens. If he died, who would quell the wars? If he died, could the peace between the heavens and the demon realm, maintained for hundreds of years, continue? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but cry on the table. I bit into the candied hawthorn, tasting the sourness inside, and cried even harder.
Why are you crying?
The candied hawthorn is too sour. I don't like it.
Alexander White silently stroked my hair for a long time before saying,
If you don't like it, I'll get you something sweet tomorrow.
Will Emily Green cease to exist?
I don't want her to, even though I temporarily dislike her.
Alexander White smiled faintly and kissed my eyes.
Your eyes are red from crying. Why do you dislike her?
A rabbit's eyes are naturally red. I don't want to tell you.
It seemed our relationship had softened that day. But it took me a long time to realize I hadn't asked where Alexander White had gone or where the blood on his clothes had come from. Emily Green's condition deteriorated rapidly.
Why does seeing her so frail make my heart ache?
Alexander White no longer used his vital essence and took Emily Green away. When he returned, he was alone.
Lily.
He sat by the window drinking, and I, in my true form, nestled in his arms.
That hurts. Stop pulling.
I transformed into my human form and helped him to bed. The wine he had been drinking smelled fragrant, like flowers.
Lily, let me show you the stars.
With a wave of his sleeve, a sky full of stars appeared before us. Alexander White conjured a sugar sculpture of a lifelike little rabbit from his hand.
You said you'd give it to me, and now you finally are. You're not very trustworthy.
He laughed and put the sugar sculpture in my mouth, then bit the other end himself.
A sweet little rabbit.
Just as I felt myself drifting into a blissful daze in his arms, Alexander White suddenly called out Nina with a sob in his voice.
Who is Nina?
He held me tighter. I felt the warmth of his tears on his face, but I only felt cold. I don't want her to perish, even though I temporarily dislike her.
Your eyes are red from crying. Why do you dislike her?
A rabbit's eyes are naturally red. She stuffed the hawthorn, now devoid of its sugar coating, into his mouth. I don't want to tell you.
It seemed our relationship had softened that day. But it took me a long time to realize I hadn't asked where Alexander White had gone or where the blood on his clothes had come from.
Ina Collins' face was identical to Emily Green's.
She was a rabbit I brought back from the mortal world during my trials. I raised her for over 300 years and discovered her exceptional talent for cultivation. I devoted all my efforts to teaching her.
Did you grow close?
Yes, we quickly became the highest combat power in the celestial realm. I even requested permission from George King to marry her. However, George King stated that although Nina Collins had extraordinary talent, she was not truly one of the celestial beings. She had to ascend to become a deity to be eligible.
What trials did she face?
The first was heavenly lightning, which I endured for her. The second was a trial in the mortal world, which I couldn't help her with. But that trial turned into a disaster.
Alexander White watched over the reincarnation stone day and night, monitoring Nina Collins' situation. Unexpectedly, someone from the celestial realm interfered. Nina Collins nearly lost her life, but Alexander White arrived just in time to bring her back, sacrificing half his life to save her.
It must have been so hard for you.
It was. but I would do it again if needed.
George King held the Fate Fairy accountable, but no one could find out who had tried to harm Nina Collins. Just as Nina Collins was rescued, she was accused of being a spy from the demon realm.
Nina Collins' failure was not only due to interference, but also because of her demon bloodline.
That's impossible. I raised her and gave her her name. I know her well.
Under Alexander White's strong defense, George King temporarily placed Nina Collins under house arrest in White Palace. But this was just the prelude to the change in their fates. Alexander White's suffering was only beginning. The air was thick with tension as Alexander White approached, his face a mask of determination.
I don't want her to pass away, even though I temporarily dislike her.
Alexander White's smile was faint as he kissed her eyes.
Your eyes are red from crying. Why do you dislike her?
A rabbit's eyes are naturally red. Cheerful, I don't want to tell you. Stuffing the hawthorn into his mouth.
It seemed their relationship had softened that day. But it took Lily a long time to realize she hadn't asked where Alexander had gone or where the blood on his clothes had come from. 16.
Daniel Brooks, where is Alexander White?
He asked me to look after you. Although we've never met, my mother did tell me to find you and take good care of you.
Why?
Little rabbit, just stay here peacefully. Alexander White is probably finding a place to rest. He lit some incense and then poured me some tea.
What do you mean?
Little rabbit, do you know why forbidden arts are called forbidden? He looked at me with a kind of pity for the naive. Resurrecting the departed, especially those taken by the sword of immortals, comes with a price.
He's probably afraid of looking too terrible and doesn't want you to see him like that.
I suddenly sat up in bed, wanting to run.
Alexander White left a divine power seal on you. Don't go looking for him.
He nodded towards a direction, and I saw a round, red rabbit lantern.
What is a divine power seal?
Simply put, he sealed his already limited power within you. If you encounter a fatal danger, the divine power will break the seal.
Yes. That day when Ethan Hunt's actions were too much for me to bear, I did feel a power healing me. How many things has Alexander White hidden from me? 17. I didn't know where to find Alexander White, so I went to the place where we used to buy sugar paintings. However, when I reached the entrance of the small village, I found a barrier. Normally, I wouldn't be able to break Alexander White's barrier, but today I easily entered. I ran through the streets to the courtyard that belonged only to the two of us. The living people on the street froze and slowly disappeared. The flowers and plants by the lake withered rapidly, and the once picturesque scenery turned desolate. I finally reached the courtyard. Alexander White was in the pavilion that hadn't disappeared yet, blood trickling from his lips, his face pale. My legs started to tremble.
Alexander White! Alexander White!
I called his name several times, but he didn't wake up.
Alexander White! Alexander White! I shook him, holding him in my arms, wanting him to open his eyes and look at me one more time.
Lily, don't come, don't come.
If you leave, how am I supposed to bring you back? My eyes blurred with tears, I felt like I was nearing the end.
Live well, silly rabbit. Practicing forbidden arts to resurrect someone taken by the sword of immortals, I will be completely destroyed. This is already a good way to go. He reached out to cover my eyes, though it was unnecessary as I could no longer see him clearly.
He called me a silly rabbit, but he was the real fool. He raised his left hand, opening his tightly clenched fist to reveal a blood-stained red fluff. It was the rabbit's tail.
Lily, live well, I love you very much.
At that moment, I couldn't tell if he loved me or the Nina Collins from thousands of years ago, or just this foolish rabbit who only caused him trouble and got angry at him. As he closed his eyes for the last time, a painful yet longing sound escaped his throat. Nina. I stared at him, tears still streaming down my face. I watched as Alexander White disappeared before my eyes, the surrounding buildings vanishing rapidly, even the lake drying up. I lay on the ground, desperately trying to feel Alexander White's warmth. He had completely disappeared, utterly destroyed. There was nothing left to prove Alexander White had ever been here. I moved my eyes numbly and saw a blackened sugar painting in a corner. I grabbed the blood-stained rabbit tail. I felt lost. Alexander White was gone.
This is a space Alexander White tore open himself. After he left, everything here naturally disappeared. His tone carried an indescribable shock. I didn't expect him to go to such extremes. Someone as obsessive as him wouldn't have lived long anyway. My condolences. But I didn't expect him to be so powerful, resurrecting you, a fallen immortal, leaving divine power in your body, and even tearing open such a real space here.
A few days later, I gave birth to 4 rabbits with red eyes in Daniel Brooks' palace. That night, I dreamed of the shining Milky Way in the sky and Alexander White holding me as we watched it. He held a little rabbit in his arms, gently tugging at its ears.
Look, that's the Moon Palace. I heard rabbits like it.
Yes, rabbits like the moon. I will never see such a gentle-colored moon again, nor will I be able to get close to the Milky Way. 18. Epilogue. The 3005th Heavenly King, Henry King, ended his life with the Sword of Immortals. His half-brother, Ethan Hunt, succeeded him. When this news reached the demon realm, Daniel Brooks was in Lily Moore's room, studying the gradually forming soul in the soul lamp. Before the Heavenly King left, Lily Moore and Daniel Brooks had met him once. Unlike their previous meeting, the Heavenly King seemed much older, and his face no longer bore the false compassion of someone who pretended to save all beings.
A wisp of General White's soul appeared by the Milky Way. I thought it might be useful to you, so I collected it in a spirit bottle.
Henry King handed the spirit bottle to Lily Moore.
Thank you. Lily Moore accepted it with both hands, Alexander White's soul. As long as there was a soul, there was hope for Alexander White's return.
Henry King said no more and dismissed them without mentioning the past. Lily Moore didn't bring it up either. As they left, Lily Moore heard a faint "I'm sorry." Daniel Brooks showed no reaction and, for the first time, spoke to Lily Moore about her mother, whom she had never met. That was the previous Demon King, Daniel Brooks' mother.
At that time, Henry King was the most inconspicuous fourth son of the Heavenly King, while my mother was already the most powerful Demon King in history. The fourth prince's mother was taken in the palace by the Heavenly King's favorite second son, but no one held him accountable.
Henry King, despite his name, suffered greatly in the heavenly realm. The resourceful fourth prince, young and fearless, sought out Daniel Brooks' mother.
I don't know much about this past, only that my mother took Henry King's second brother for some reason. There were even rumors that Henry King ascended to the throne because my mother helped him.
So how did Mother pass?
I don't know. I only saw her a few times after I was born. When she came back the last time, she was already dying. She only told me that I had a sister and that I must find you.
Maybe the Heavenly King was responsible.
Recalling their last meeting, Lily Moore showed no sadness, shaking her head and continuing to look at the soul lamp on the table. The wick in the center slowly lit up. She was immediately distracted by this and paid no attention to the heavenly king's passing.
Will Alexander White come back? I've been dreaming about him a lot lately.
Lily Moore looked at Daniel Brooks with her red eyes.
He didn't tell her that because of the divine power sealed in her, Alexander White's fragmented soul had always been by her side. But the soul was too shattered, and it might take thousands of years to reincarnate. And even then, with the incomplete soul and low power, who knew if they could wait for Alexander White's rebirth?
He will. He patted her head and said,
Alexander White, please come back.